You're listening to the Weekend Show podcast with Ken Kidney. Download every Sunday at soundcloud.com/The Weekend Show.
Disney, Gar.
Disney. Woo. Disney.
We've been talking about this for a while. Like, you know, we like, in fairness, a lot of our podcasts have involved discussion on Disney, so we thought, why not make it an entire episode?
A whole Disney show. Disney, the people that own your childhood and own like all your feelings. They even now own how you think about your feelings because of Inside Out.
Exactly.
And they own everything you love because they have Star Wars and Pixar as well, or Pixar and
Marvel.
They have everything you love.
Yeah, even all those Oscar films are made through Miramax, and they used to own that as well. So
Yeah.
they, if you like something, there's a good chance that Disney have some finger in that pie.
At the very least, they've distributed it. If you like sports, they have ESPN. If you like television, they have ABC. They reach everywhere.
But specifically this week, we're going to talk about Walt Disney Animation, who are in the midst of somewhat of a resurgence in the last few years. I would say starting kind of in 2009.
I would say 2008.
Tentatively. Oh,
Yeah.
conflict.
There is conflict because you would say The Princess and the Frog, I would imagine.
Yes,
I would say Bolt.
Interesting. I would agree with you in that the signs of things turning around were there with Bolt because it was a critical and commercial success.
It's a really good film.
It is a good film.
Bolt flies under the radar because it's lumped in with like Home on the Range as one of the terrible Disney failures. But Bolt is a good film.
Interesting tidbit. Tidbit. I love that word.
Tidbit.
Bolt started life as a Pixar film,
Yeah, but then Disney and Pixar had their little falling out for a while.
so they
didn't
decided to buy them instead.
Yeah, as Disney tend to do.
$7 billion they paid for it, and in that single move, Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, R.I.P., became the largest single shareholder on the board at Disney.
Do you know the makers of Candy Crush were bought recently for like $7 billion?
Wow.
Marvel went for $6 billion. Marvel.
And I think it's a fad. You've said that before, Gar. Mobile gaming is
Marvel.
a fad.
These Marvel characters have existed for like 60 years. Like Star Wars, like LucasArts are one of the biggest film franchises of all time. $4 billion.
I know.
Candy Crush 7.
This is not the Candy Crush podcast, Gar.
It's absurd, Ken. Pixar went for, how much did Pixar go for?
$7 billion.
$7 billion. Pixar, like the creative geniuses behind like creatively brilliant things are worth the
Billions upon
same
billions.
as matching three things and going pow.
Yeah.
Mini rant over.
So we thought we'd kick off this week's show with a brief history of the studio's fortunes, the highs, the lows, and the road back to glory. That's my news voice.
I'm I knew you said Charlie Haughey.
Charlie Haughey is our former Prime Minister.
Yes, our former horribly corrupt Prime Minister.
So, like, with the as you said, with the critical and commercial success of The Princess and the Frog, Bolt, back around 2008, 2009, things started to turn around. Then, as we moved into the kind of the next few years, we had Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, and Big Hero 6, all of which have had critical and commercial success. In fact, 2 years in a row now, Disney have won Best Animated Picture.
Yeah, I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 should have won over Big Hero 6.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with you, but Disney,
even though I loved Big Hero 6.
It's tough, isn't it? It was a tough. I do think it was a tough choice.
It was. They're both tremendous.
But one of the things that can't be discounted is the fact that their animated shorts, is in particular two recent ones called Paperman, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we discussed both of these a few weeks ago.
And Feast, both also won Academy Awards. So they've basically got the animated category, both of them, at the Oscars tied up for the last 2 years.
And both are lovely little films.
But it's basically returned to the main stage of animated pictures in terms of both critical and commercial success. And the reason I mentioned the shorts is I think that a reason that they're being so successful is because basically the shorts act as a feeder system and a talent development program. Pixar have long since used this strategy because they started in shorts of letting younger people handle these films, and then it brings them in. They it kind of hones their crafts, and you can see what their ideas are like. So you see if they've got potential to step up and take on a feature.
I just sure hope the people behind Lava don't make a film anytime soon.
Garrett's not a fan of Lava.
I think this is the third time I've shat all over Lava on this podcast.
But it's kind of like any industry. industry, I think history has shown the success of the studio and animated pictures in general to be cyclical. Following their heyday of the mid 20th century, the studio entered a period of decline. Walt Disney's death in the late 1960s kind of coincided with the deterioration of both in terms of revenue and quality that would last until the late 80s. So basically, he died in 66, and it was nearly 2 decades until they got back on track.
I call this the Rescuers period of Disney.
Although The Rescuers is one of the rare exceptions that is actually a success.
They made like 17 of them, though, didn't they? It feels like they made 17. They probably only made 2.
They did only make 2, The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under. It's actually the first Disney sequel.
Ooh. That actually... Was it released properly?
It was, both of them.
Because there are a bunch of them, but they were released like straight to DVD.
Yeah.
Like The Lion King 2 was released straight to DVD. That's just madness when you think about it.
Basically, they hit a point where, like, besides The Rescuers, which actually did work out pretty well for them, both when they released it in Walt Disney's era, and then the sequel was actually released, I think, at the end of the 80s
Yeah, toward the end of the 80s.
Yeah, so that's when they started to get back on track. But 1985 was an unprecedented low when the Black Cauldron failed to recoup its costs, which it's not untypical of a Disney film. Like even Pinocchio, which over time has become a classic. You know, at the time, just because it was around kind of wartime, it just didn't make that much money. It was got an okay reception, but over time people come to appreciate it. But you know, the film was so poorly reviewed that it wasn't even released on home video until 1995.
Clearly, a high priority for them.
10 years later. So it's as you can see, it's a far cry from the sustained period of huge critical and commercial success for the previous 3 decades, starting with 1937's Snow White, which was the first feature-length animated picture. I had the pleasure of going to the Walt Disney Family Museum recently, which told the story of Walt Disney. So Snow White is featured, and it was a massive gamble. They spent like a couple of million on it, which at the time was a lot of money. And they were having to borrow money to fix the picture. There's actually a mistake in the animation towards the end of the picture, but they're like, we just have to release this at this point.
Just leave it in.
But people didn't believe that an animated picture would sustain an audience. They're like a little thing that you have at the start of a picture, but it wouldn't
To entertain the kiddies.
Or yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have sustain people over an entire picture, but like the entire audience was in raptures apparently at the first screening. They were just spellbound by it, and it is a spellbinding medium because the only limit really is your imagination. I know technical skills and technical limitations do limit things somewhat, but
Well, less so these days.
you can do more in an animated film than you can do
Yeah.
in a
You can create a
live-action
whole
film.
fantastical universe if you like.
So signs of a turnaround came with the release of 1988's Oliver and Company, which is the Bolt of the 80s.
Yeah.
Basically, it was a kind of first of all, it was a financial success, but it was actually a return to the musical format, which they had abandoned for a while. And we're going to talk about that later, but I think it's a key component in all Disney films. The music, basically, I think most of my memories come from the music.
They make it right. Like The Little Mermaid, which is the next film they released after Oliver and Company. We watched that recently. It's not that good a film.
Yes,
But it has great songs.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed. I remembered it more fondly. Maybe it's more for the girls, I think.
Yeah, that was like Part of Your World and Under the Sea are like top-notch classics. But the film is like, yeah. But the songs are great.
But as you mentioned, The Little Mermaid is considered the start of what they call the Disney Renaissance period, which lasted for another 10 years after that. So
it kind of still lasts today. There was a bit of a blip, but it
There
wasn't
wasn't
such a long blip that you would call the end of Renaissance period.
No, I think it was from about 2002 to 2008. So it was about
Yeah.
6 years. So it was, it wasn't the kind of first. Well, it was 2 decades, and then it was like kind of a decade of success, and then we have kind of a 6-year lull. So it was much less than the 2 decades they had
Yeah.
after the death of Walt Disney. But literally, they could do no wrong in the 80s and 90s, like hit after hit after hit, mostly based on fairy tales. Do you think that made a difference?
I have a theory about this, Ken. A whole theory about Disney films and based off source material.
Go ahead.
I think Disney films that are based on prior source material succeed, and the ones that don't generally don't. Because when you think of them, Pooh, The Rescuers, Robin Hood, Sword in the Stone, 101 Dalmatians, Fox and the Hound, Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Bambi, Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo, Cinderella, Little Mermaid, Frozen, The Lion King, Aladdin, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, and Mulan. All based off pre-existing properties. All adaptations of mostly books or stories.
Yeah, well, they say, like, people consider The Lion King an original film, but
It's Macbeth.
It is Macbeth, basically. And
Whereas Dinosaur, Fantasia, Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, A Home on the Range, some of them were kind of inspired by stories, but they're mostly original ideas. Yeah.
Treasure Planet didn't make that much money, I think.
Yeah.
But that was based on a property, so that's an exception that proves the rule.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a streak of successive hits that lasted from about 1988 to 1999 with Tarzan. Then after that, they had a kind of couple with Brother Bear and Lilo and Stitch, which were successful. But
Lilo and Stitch is a tremendous film. It's kind of the diamond in the rough of their terrible period.
Yeah.
And
when Brother Bear is quite an enjoyable film as well.
If you look forward to net picks, that's what my net picks.
It's got a bit of a familiar premise though.
It does, but I don't mind. But Lilo and Stitch is directed by Dean DeBlois and Chris Sanders, who went on to do How to Train Your Dragon. And you can see very similar ideas in both films. They're both essentially boy/girl, and they're dog films. Just the dog happens to be an alien that wants to kill and destroy the planet, and a dragon in the other film. But I really like Lilo and Stitch. It's a really dark, weird film.
So that was made in 2002. So as we come out of that, past Brother Bear, which was around 2002 as well.
Yeah.
We start to hit the decline period in the early 2000s.
Because they kind of had Tarzan, and then they had kind of Lilo and Stitch, which is Lilo and Stitch did really well as well, kind of financially, and then they kind of collapsed.
Yeah, Brother Bear made money. I'm pretty sure either Atlantis or Treasure Planet. One of them made money and one of them not. I can't remember.
Home on the Range bombed though.
Basically, yeah, Home on the Range was their 2004 offering, which was about anthropomorphic cows.
Well, in fairness, Disney have weird ideas.
Trying to save their farm. It was such a failure. It was deemed such a failure that it killed all 2D projects in the studio.
Yeah. Killed 2D dead.
They were like, no, we're not doing it 2D anymore. We're going to do 3D. And they laid off most of their animation department, signaling the demise of the institution that was the House of Disney. That iconic animation studio. You may have seen pictures of it. It's got the wizard's hat on top. It's kind of like modeled after Mickey Mouse in Fantasia. It's a fantastic building. Got rid of it all. Focused mostly on 3D and live action ventures with Selena Gomez and the like.
Yeah, and these days they can't buy a live action hit to save their life, bar the Marvel and Star Wars properties. John Carter or anybody.
Yeah. So had the magic simply gone, Garrett? Disney's second decline, I think, can be attributed to a number of factors. They're subject to stiffer competition.
Shrek.
Basically, the person they stiffed, Jeffrey Katzenberg, used to be head of animation at Disney. They sacked him and he formed his own company. He formed DreamWorks.
And they had Shrek.
Shrek was a monster hit for them.
Especially during this particular period and Ice Age.
As I said, I just mentioned, their kind of a focus in general has shifted to the lucrative tween
movies.
Tween market with Lindsay Lohan vehicles and later the High School Musical franchise. Ironically, Disney's distribution production partnership with Pixar undermined their own releases as well.
Yeah.
So
and what are they? Ron Clements and John Muster kind of stopped making films.
Yeah.
They made Treasure Planet.
Yeah.
Which was
yeah.
But like they were responsible for Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Hercules. They're going to be making Mona. They made Princess and the Frog.
So they have
a bit of a magic touch.
Exactly. So when they went away, things got bad. When they came back,
yeah,
they struck gold again. So there's something to be said for new blood, but they have to be guided by
Alan Menken songs.
Yeah.
If there's a Disney song you love, there's like an 8 out of 10 chance that Alan Menken wrote it.
Exactly. Pixar films eventually garnered the same kind of box office success that Disney's Renaissance period had in the previous decade. Probably more so, I would say, even.
Yeah. Especially kind of they took over Disney's role as kind of making very culturally significant animated films.
But Disney just got a bit safe. I know they also technically you could say basing your things on or your pieces on fairy tales is safe, but they just kind of just coasted. Early 3D offerings like Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons were deemed melodramatic. I read this off of many articles that they're just like,
Melodramatic.
which is probably the worst you can get. I just think they lost sight of the vision and the fearless approach that paid dividends in the end.
And kind of the heart.
In the past, yeah.
They lost some of the heart.
Basically, I don't think it took them a long time to recover after Walt died, and they found that vision again, and then they lost it again. So,
Yeah.
Walt Disney himself, I like telling the story, was notorious. He sometimes if he didn't like a film, he'd just scrap it and start again, no matter how much money or time they spent on it.
They throw it out the window.
Sometimes after months or even years of work, he would throw the film. A notable example being Pinocchio and The Jungle Book. Rather infamously, Beauty and the Beast was in production for 6 months when the studio head Jeffrey Katzenberg, who got ousted and then formed DreamWorks, ordered that the film be scrapped and start over again from scratch.
It's ballsy.
One of the key elements that changed was they made it a musical. It wasn't going to be a musical.
Yeah.
And it was the first ever film in 1992 to be nominated, 92 to be nominated for best picture, I should say. Best animated picture didn't exist for a few more years.
Can you imagine the Beauty and the Beast film without Angela Lansbury singing Beauty and the Beast?
I know.
If you guys like, if I were to have a death wish, it would be while I'm dying, Angela Lansbury just be sitting over my deathbed singing me Beauty and the Beast. I'd be like, I can go happily.
I've actually seen the reel of the first 6 months work. It was done in England, actually. They were working on it in England. It's terrible. It's like, they should burn it. I should not have had to see that. But
You cried when you watched that.
I
I have that's one of my vivid childhood
I'm
memories.
not afraid to say it. It's emotional.
Ken crying when he turns back into a man.
It's
Spoilers
beautiful.
for a nearly 30-year-old film. Well, 20 odd.
20 odd, that's depressing. But the point is that I think Walt Disney was a bit insane, and he didn't compromise. Like, he was a bit of a hard taskmaster. Those values that he had and those principles that he created was what brought them to the dance, is what fueled their renaissance. And when they got back to it, it's what fueled their period now, which I have dubbed the new renaissance.
Renaissance 2.0 Electric Boogaloo.
So it began to change around again in 2007 when they bought Pixar, basically.
Yeah, they just bought the smart people. And then John Lasseter kind of took over Disney as well, didn't he?
Yeah, so that's basically the reason. The acquisition brought John Lasseter back to Disney, who had sacked him in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, and then he went on to make Toy Story and A Bug's Life and Monsters Inc. and all those films you love.
He went on, obviously, to become a founding member of Pixar, and along with Steve Jobs, changed animation forever. Basically, it brought a lot of people as well, like Ed Catmull, got brought into the fold at Disney, essentially. And one of the key changes he made, he basically got he got terminated from Disney for stepping on toes, but then he came back and he was the boss, so he could do whatever he wanted.
It's just like, yeah, we fired you, but now run things.
One of his key steps was to restore 2D animation, and he said, we had to get back to basics. We had to get back to what made us great in the first place. So he brought back 2D animation at the studio, and there is a studio there now. Thankfully, they've kind of reestablished it, and they still do the 3D stuff, but every few years they actually make a point of commissioning a 2D.
Yeah, sure.
traditionally
Pooh was a
picture.
2D film, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Mona is going to be one as well.
And that Pooh film is delightful. If you did I think it's 2011, because there's the original 1977 Pooh film, but watch the more recent Pooh film. That is an utter delight.
And there's another point that he also rehired Ron Clements and John Musker,
Yeah.
and they helmed Princess and the Frog, which was a 2D picture, which they had totally discounted only a few years earlier, which made mega money.
And they said they're doing Mona, starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
And it kept on coming. 2010 Tangled, which is I was going into that being a bit cynical, and I came out.
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. It's both. It's like the anti Little Mermaid, because it's both funny and charming and entertaining, and it has great music.
But it marked kind of a new direction for the studio, combining CGI and traditional techniques and principles. And
By the way, Tangled based on Rapunzel.
it does, yeah.
The theory holds up. Even if you look at Wreck-It Ralph, which isn't technically based on anything, it draws plenty of inspiration from video game worlds.
But Lasseter felt that 3D animation, while a revolution, 2D animation created more character believability, and I suppose like that place in our hearts, like 3D seems almost a bit too advanced. For me, the imperfectness of 2D makes it more relatable to me. I don't know how to describe
I've
it.
always thought for human characters, 3D animation looks a little weird.
Yeah,
You know, for stuff like Toy Story with toys, and most Pixar films, which Pixar films tend not to be about humans, or at least a lot of them tend not to be about humans.
yeah,
I always thought 3D just looks a little off,
it does.
whereas 2D kind of works. There's a
Yeah.
charm to 2D animation for human figures.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So, Wreck-It Ralph, praised by critics as the most original Disney concept in years. Interestingly, that was actually in development as far back as the 80s, but they only managed to get it done in.
Well, Pixar had that famous like lists of films.
Yeah,
Like you can see Wall-E in Toy Story, isn't it?
yep,
Because they had those ideas locked down. Like it's like, here's our list of ideas. Let's make a bunch of films.
exactly. Frozen, an adaptation again of Hans Christian Andersen's famous Snow Queen, was a smash hit, grossing well over $1 billion and double that in merchandise.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a sensation, and there is going to be a direct sequel.
Yeah, I think one of the important things there is I wanted to note that as well as obviously the return to traditional values, there's more of a role for women at animation in Disney now. As you may have seen, Frozen is co-directed by Jennifer Lee, one of the talented female animators at Disney. And I'm not like as I said back in the day, famously their first golden period, what they call the golden period of animation, was headed by what they call the 9 old men.
Yeah.
But I think in 2015, you just need that kind of influence there. You need input from both sides.
And when you can see plenty of female characters in the older Disney films, like in Snow White or Cinderella or like Pocahontas.
But they're written and created by men.
Yeah, and they fill a very, very kind of regimented, rigid mold.
Stereotypical, where female characters in Disney films these days, while maybe still a little bit in that mold, they are a little bit more complex. And I think that's
especially
helping.
like Frozen is just like women kicking ass.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't need no guys. We're just going to sing songs about becoming ice queens.
Big Hero 6 wasn't quite the hit of Frozen, but it is a Disney princess film, and that's going to make the money,
Yeah, and in fairness, to compare it to something, it's like when Iron Man 3 came out after the Avengers. Iron Man 3 made $1.2 billion, which was less than the Avengers 1.5, and people said, oh, it's a bit of a flop.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Big Hero 6 made like $600-800 million. Totally did more than enough business for Disney to be happy. And I'm pretty sure they're also making a sequel to that.
Yeah, nearly 616 million, and it won the Best Picture.
And it's based
Best
on a
animated
pre-existing property, a Man of Action comic.
which was bought by Marvel, which then fell
Disney
into the
bought.
hands of Disney. But
And it's actually, it's a relatively obscure comic, and Baymax looks super weird in the comic.
yeah, they changed it quite a bit for the better.
Like, as I said, Disney took a lot of these pre-existing stories, but they Disneyfied them. There's a very, like, Peter Pan is a dark enough story.
Some might say they euthanized them, but
They made them like Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm. They're kind of depressing, and they're not kid stories, no matter how much they try and present them as kid stories.
But what I want from a Disney film, I want maybe fall in love with them. First of all, I can identify with the stories. A loner essentially sometimes.
Usually with the parents being killed off.
Yeah, struggling to fulfill their destiny.
So much so that when it happened in Frozen, it's just like, boom, parents dead.
Tick the box.
Yep.
But it's also just like pure escapism, and that's what you want from like a film. You're just like, I have my troubles again. I had an annoying week at work, whatever. One of the worst, like one day was like one of the worst days I've ever had. People just kept calling me incompetent. I'm gonna go. I won't go off on a rant.
I'm not incompetent.
But I can go and watch a Disney film and just forget.
Yeah, just watch Hercules. And it's like, bless my soul, Herc is on a roll. And you bounce your head up and down and you go, Herculade! And you're happy.
It just reminds me of it. I suppose what it does, it takes you back to a time when you were more innocent. It just kind of links you to your childhood. And that's what's the appeal is for me, and that's why I've never grown out of it. We could say so much more, Gar. We're going to go a bit over time.
Before we get out again,
Huh?
favorite Disney film?
That's a very, very hard question.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Aladdin.
Ooh.
It was the first film I ever saw in the cinema.
Right.
It just had it all. Like, it had a good pre-existing source material, interesting side characters, a good antagonist, good protagonist.
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, who was amazing.
And great music.
Great music by Alan Menken.
Yeah.
And
by the way, Gallivant TV show has Alan Menken music.
Genius.
It's a great show anyway, but that pushes it over the top.
But what about you, Gar?
I go Lilo and Stitch.
Really?
I really like Lilo and Stitch. I think it's a super charming film.
And, you just mentioned music, Gar, before we go on to our next segment. What do you think the role of music is in past and current success? We kind of touched on it there.
Well, if you look at Wreck-It Ralph, it had no music. Big Hero 6 had no music.
Yeah.
So it's not essential.
No.
Films don't need the music. Good music helps.
Yeah.
Like if there's a film that I like that has good music, I can watch it over and over again.
Yes.
Because I just wait for the songs. Like I really like the Les Mis, the recent Les Mis film.
And Frozen is proof in the pudding there, because...
And it's the same with the Muppets. Like Muppets films that have better songs are better Muppets films.
Like, people watch Frozen again and again. Like, even if you know the plot back to front, you just want to hear the songs. And
Yeah.
that's... So, and that's probably why it had an extended theatrical run, which got it more money.
And had a sing-along re-release the next year.
I was just about to mention that re-releases garner more and more money. But I think that they create a character to the film that just wasn't there for, as in Beauty and the Beast. I've seen what it was before the musical.
Yeah.
It was terrible. So you shouldn't try to shoehorn it in just because Disney is like... Disney is known for musicals. They've always been known for musicals, and they got away from that, and it coincided with a lull period, as you said, with Big Hero 6 and other films. It doesn't have to be. Wreck-It Ralph as well. It doesn't have to be a musical, but I think that it just augments certain stories.
Yeah.
And other ones it doesn't. But
And like in the case of The Little Mermaid, it makes a mediocre film much better.
yeah, it just gives them life beyond the story, because you can watch the film without basically looking at the story if you don't want to. You can go on YouTube and listen to all the songs.
Yeah.
And it'll, I think that, again, it's just a kind of one of those things where music and animation are two very, very powerful mediums. So when you combine them, it makes a super medium, I would say.
Yeah.
It just creates something special. And I don't know, over the years they've just gotten the most fantastic writers to and it's not just the songs, it's the scores as well. I mean, the score to The Lion King, has that African kind of
Hans Zimmer.
undertone. It's just like, I listen to the score on its own.
Is it This Land?
Yeah.
Yeah, This Land. Great piece of
Gives me
music.
the goosebumps. It makes me well up even listening to it.
Yeah. Plus
So-
it has Elton John doing the soundtrack, so that helps.
It's not that Disney films can't live without music, but I think with any film, the music is
It's integral.
it's integral.
Like we talked about How to Train Your Dragon. That has like a brilliant score. With a different score, that's a totally different film. Like music is integral to films.
We'll just sum up by saying John Lasseter brought the emphasis back to high quality animation, enhanced by memorable characters and music. It seems that a return to traditional values mixed with modern techniques is the recipe for success, even though history has shown that this